Hey Titans, this is Mordecai from GamerTitan.com. In this video we're going to be going over how to create a buy menu within Core. Now we're going to go ahead and fire up the editor. Now in this video I'm actually going to do something a bit different because I'm testing different formats. Let me know in the comments down below which one you guys prefer the best. With this particular project I went ahead and already published it on community content, so if you're not sure how to download something from community content, go ahead and when you're inside Core, click on the Community Content tab, and then you can search for Weapon Buy Menu by Mordecai. And you simply click Import. It will go into your project files, and it will be right here, and you would just drag the Weapon Buy Menu over. Now this project or this module is set up that it could be used with any of the Core templates, the frameworks for the FPS games, third-person shooters, all that stuff, and work right out of the box. So to demonstrate real quick, let's go ahead and just do a preview. And so right now, because I'm still using the standard template's set up to just spawn me with a basic assault rifle, so if I right click it doesn't actually aim and I can just shoot. So if I press Q, I pull up my buy menu, and you notice that it stopped me from being able to aim. So if I close it, I can aim, and it allows me to buy. So I have 5,000 credits, so I can go ahead and buy the advanced assault rifle. So I click buy. Now I have the advanced assault rifle. You can see it has a little scope at the top. Right click, I can zoom in. If I want, I could go ahead and buy a shotgun. And just to demo, I have 2,000 credits. I'm going to try and buy the sniper rifle. I click it. I don't have enough money, so I can't actually purchase this sniper rifle, but I can go ahead and buy the SMG. So this type of functionality is something that a lot of people that I've showed Core to were asking about, and it was definitely something that I was interested in getting to work, and that's what I went to do. And so first off, I want to give a few shout outs. The first shout out is to Wave Paradigm from the Discord and in the community. How I kind of started this project was, if we go to menu, he actually had the, so I typed in emote menu. He actually had the only menu system on community content, and so I downloaded that, kind of got familiar with how he built his menu, which does, it's a spiral menu to select different emotes. And that kind of got me familiar with menus, so then I went and created this one. The other shout out I want to give to is to Fear the Dev. He helped me figure out how to use event listeners. So let's go ahead and dive into the code. So first off, there's two different scripts that we're going to be using. One of them is a server script, and so that's in charge of actually giving your player the weapon. And the reason we have to have a server script and a client script is because the server script is a bit more protected. If a client was just able to spawn weapons and do everything on the client side, from a cheating perspective, it'd be very easy to, manipulate your games. So the first thing we have is our weapon server script. And so we'll go ahead and fire that up into Visual Studio Code. And so once again, before we dive into this, how this is set up is if you download this from community content, it's actually set up where right out of the box you can customize a lot of the stuff without having to manipulate any of the code. And so for example, when you first drag it into your hierarchy, if you click on the main folder here and you go down into custom properties, you'll see the first custom property is your starting currency. Let's see if we can make this a bit bigger. So your starting currency is whatever the player starts with when they start the game. Now right now I have this set up as client side, and it's only stored as a resource. So if someone leaves a game and they come back, they're going to have 5,000 again. And so you may want to change this. We also, in this video or maybe future videos, we'll show you how to actually implement it. So when players do certain actions within your game, like get a kill, maybe they're on the winning team, you can actually set it so they get more currency based on whatever objectives you want. So the other thing is the menu binding is set to ability extra 20, which is Q. So you can go ahead and change that to whatever you would like. The for these custom properties, this 1 is the first slot here. So I have buy advanced assault rifle, so it's 1, and then the price right below it is weapon price 1. So if we just change this to say 5,000 and then press play real quick, you'll see that it dynamically changes on the menu, and then in the back end it knows that this assault rifle is 5,000. So if we click it, it was exactly 5,000 because that's what our starting price, our starting currency was. So we'll go ahead and pause it again. And the same thing is true with all of these different weapons. So whatever slot you're wanting to adjust, just make sure that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So just make sure that you're changing the right one. The other thing to note is for your weapon to actually work, it needs to be a templated weapon. So it has to actually be in your game's project content. And so, for example, if you're pulling something out of core content that isn't already in your project folder for whatever reason, or maybe you're getting a weapon from community content, just make sure that it is a template. Now, I believe if you get something from community content, it'll already be that, so that's pretty easy. So then you would just click. So say I want to change this by the assault rifle. You just double click, and then you just have to select whatever weapon you want. So for example, it has to be blue because that means that it is networked, and it has to also be a template. So like this advanced axe won't work. It has to be an actual template. So that's why I made these all a template, and I just named them by. That way I don't overwrite your guys' stock weaponry. So that's how you change the back end. But if we change a gun right now, the icon won't change. And so how you do that is it's inside of the client context folder, and it's in the menu container. And then I named each folder the same slot that we have within the custom properties of the main folder. So weapon 1, once again, would be the assault rifle. And so if we wanted to change the icon, we go to weapon 1 folder, we go to weapon 1 icon. You just double click on the icon, and then you can scroll and change it to whatever icon you want. And so let's just see. So for example, just say that we changed it to this dice. And then you're going to have to scale it to the appropriate size. So you could drag like this, or a better way to do it is to scale it right within the custom properties. So do like 150, 150, maybe 125. And so that's how you would adjust the image. The other thing is within this we have the you don't want to change the by text, you don't want to change the weapon cost. This is dynamic. The other one that you want to change most likely is the colors of the button, and so the buttons are named 1. So for weapon 1 and weapon 2, it's going to be named 2. Don't change these names, because this is how I have my code, as I'll show you in the back end in the weapon server script, to be able to identify which slot this weapon is. So just make sure that you don't rename the button, but you can change the color. And so to change the color or to change the style of the button, the same thing as you can click on the image, you can change the button style to whatever you want. It could be a banana or an apple. So just click that, and then the same thing with the button colors, you can adjust it. And then as you can see, go into the game and it's changed. So that's just how to modify the menu a bit. Same thing is true with any of this stuff. Just kind of play around with it. So the background, make sure that you have both of these up at the top. But if you want to change the frame color, this red frame color is the out of money or not enough money error frame, and so that one's at the bottom. And so you can hide it, and then you can see what the actual frame of the menu is, which is up at the top. And I should have really renamed this for you guys, but it's the first two. It's called background with the frame, and you'd be able to change the frame. But that's going to kind of mess it up because we'd have to change both, so we're not going to mess with that. So now let's go ahead and dive into the actual code. I want to just give you a brief demonstration of the menu and the functionality of it. And so on the weapons server, now this is the backend script, I'm making script.parent, and the reason I'm doing that is that way I can have all the custom properties inside of the main folder. That way you have all your options right in the main folder. And so I'm getting each of these weapons prices, and then I'm putting them into a table. And so similar to what we did in the previous video where we put in the different titles, I'm putting in all the different weapon prices that are from the custom property, putting it in a table, and then that allows us to then use the same select method that we were using with level for the titles to use based on the button. And so that's why we have the buttons named as 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. It's because these prices are in this table, and then based on the index of the button, so button 1 would index the first weapon price in the table. The starting currency is just our custom property for our starting currency. I should have made this a custom property as well, so I might update the community, the menu on the community content to make this a custom property. But destroy on death, if this is set to false and you have the default static equipment, which comes with a framework, set to respawn, give you a weapon on respawn, then you'll actually overlay two weapons, because I didn't modify that static script, and so therefore it will still spawn whatever weapon you have as the default weapon. So to fix that problem, just leave this as true. If you set this to false, just make sure that your static weapon is set to not give you a weapon on respawn. So then this function is fired by the client side, and so before we dive into all of this, all we have to do is look at this event listener down at the bottom. We have this events.connect for player, update weapon, and then update weapon is the function. And so that is this right here. So if we dive back into core real quick and we go to down at the bottom, we have this client by menu client. This is the client side. So this script is in charge of the UI side of stuff. So if we open this up, we have a lot of custom properties. And so once again, we have to pass these same numbers. And so let's see here. For buy, we're just passing the buttons. So if we go back, we're passing the button clicks, and then we are then getting the weapon buy menu. So this is the main folder. So this allows us to then, all of these custom properties are set within the main folder. So we have the menu button binding, and so this is the binding that we press Q to open the menu. And then we have all the different weapon prices and then the cost text. And this is, you don't really need to change this stuff. This is just all because we have this all set up dynamically that we can just switch it just from the folder. And then we are changing the weapon's price to a string, and that's because we want to display the price on the button. So if you didn't want that to happen, if you for whatever reason didn't want the player to know what the price of the gun was, you could just comment these out, but I suggest leaving that. When they first spawn in, on line 36 here, the menu is enabled as false, and that's, if you turn this to true, as soon as a player joins the game, the menu will pop up. So that's an option for you, but I have it as false. And then for Q press, this was just I'm setting this to false. We'll kind of get into why I have this in a bit. And then the other thing is I'm forcing this as true, but if you wanted, you could have a trigger. So you could add a trigger zone where if the player was inside of a trigger, then it would set the buy zone to true, and then that would allow you to set up the functionality where a player would only be able to use the menu system within a certain zone, as opposed to being able to, because how it is right now, if you force this to true, they're just able to open the menu at any time throughout the entire game. And so maybe you want it more like a specific area so you just put a trigger. I was printing the weapon price because I was debugging, and then once again we're making a table with the weapon prices. And the reason we're doing this is because we also want to check on the client side if they have enough money or enough currency to actually purchase the weapon. And so we're doing a lot of the checks on the front end because I originally was sending events to the back end server, and this just is better performance. So I'm making a table, putting all the weapon prices in from our custom properties right here. I'm setting the player's currency to 0. That way it is a variable within the script, so it's aware. And then the text box, I believe, is the currency. That needs to be renamed. And then the prop not enough money and the error frame, these are the two. This is the red text that pops up and the red frame that pops up if you don't have enough money. And then we turn it to false. That way it's not popped up as soon as the menu is pressed. And so then down at the bottom we have a bunch of event listeners, and so the first one is on player joins. We fire out an on player join event, and then so it's right here on line 101, and then on line 102 we're checking if the player is equal to game.local player. So we're making sure that it's checking the right person, making sure that the player is the same player, and then it is printing how much resources they have. And so because they have we set it to 5,000, then it will print whatever their resources are. Their binding events on binding pressed, this is the event that allows you to open up the menu. So if we go up to on binding press, we are doing a check that the binding is menu button, and so the menu button was up here on line 13, and it's the menu binding, which is the ability extra 22, which is Q. And then we're checking this in buy zone, and we're forcing this to true. So once again, if we set that to false, this whole thing would fail and it wouldn't open the menu. And then we are checking if Q press equals false. And the reason we're doing this is that way the player can press Q and then let off and then have the menu. Because if you didn't have this, when they let off, because we have the we would have to have a on release event, and then the menu would close. So I preferred to just allow them to tap Q, open the menu, and then when they tap Q again, Q press would not be false, and therefore it would skip this part of the if statement and go to this, because the first time they click it, first time we click it, we're setting it to true. That way they click it again and then it closes. And so on line 55, when we press Q, we want to enable the menu, and so what this does is it makes the entire menu visible to the player. We want to set the cursor visibility. So that was the functionality that allowed our cursor to pop up, because before our mouse movement was locked to our aim position. On line 58, we want to set it so the cursor can interact with the UI. If we didn't have this, you'd have to double click the menu to actually, you'd have to click once so the mouse was able to interact with the menu, and then you'd have to click it again. So by setting it to true, it allows the player to press Q, and then they could just purchase a weapon by clicking the mouse button right out the gate, as opposed to having to double click. And then we have to do something on the server script. So we do an events.broadcast to server, and then we're broadcasting this player look off, and we're passing the player. And the reason we're doing this is if we go, this is functionality that turns off the movement of the player, and this can only be done on the server. And so we have to do an event. So we go back over to the weapon server real quick, and if we copy this, we do find, it'll be down here. So all it's doing is it's making player look control mode, look mode none, and once again this makes it so they can't aim once the menu's open, because they have their cursor out. If we didn't set that, then when they were moving their cursor, they would also still be aiming as well. So we don't want that. So that is how they open the menu, and then the same thing is if they pressed it again, if they press Q again, then it would once again skip this if statement and go to this, and then it's the opposite of everything. It sets Q press to false, it disables the menu, it sets the cursor visibility to false, and then it stops allowing the mouse to interact with the UI, and then it does the opposite event broadcast, which is back in the weapon server, which turns their look mode to relative, which turns it back on, allowing them to aim. So then if we scroll down again, we have a bunch of these buy one, click event, on click, buy two, on click event. So we're setting all these click events, and what this is click events for the buttons, and so they're all firing to on click. So our on click function is right here. We are doing a for loop to check that the player that pressed or clicked on the button is the local player. So first we're doing a for loop to get all the players, and then we are pulling all the players out of the available players. We're making them the variable p, and then we're making sure that they equal, that they're the same as get local player, which means whoever is on the client side, the local player. And then if that is true, then we are setting the player currency, we're getting the player's currency, and we're passing p because the player in this for loop is p. We are setting up a new variable called select, and we are getting the button name, and that's because an on-click event passes the button, and then the button has some parameters that we can get. One of them is name, and that's why I named the buttons in the hierarchy 1, 2, and 3 through 6. That's because we're passing it to this, and it's allowing us to do that same table lookup by making a new variable on line 74 called wep, and we have to change it to a number because the button's name is a string, and we need to make it a number, an integer. And then we are checking the weapon price by getting the weapon table and passing the button name. So if we clicked 1, for example, the button's name would be 1. We're changing it to a number, so it would actually be an integer, and then we're passing that number into the table. And then once again, that weapon table is defined up here by the weapon price. And so if it was a 1, it would get the weapon price of the first weapon, which we defined up in the custom properties. I was doing some prints for some debugging, and then on the client side we have an if statement that we're checking to make sure that the player's currency is more than or greater than or equal to the weapon's price. And if it's true, then the prop not enough money is disabled, and I just put a string that has nothing in it, and then the error frame is false. And that's because if they don't have enough money, it puts the weapons frame, the error frame, to not enough money and true. And so if they tried to purchase a weapon that was too much money, it would give them the error frame. And if they tried to purchase it something else that they could afford, it would get rid of that error frame. And in this if statement, if they do have enough money, it then needs to do something on the server that the client can actually do. And so it fires a broadcast to the server called update weapon, and it passes select. So it's passing the button name as an integer, and we're doing the same thing on the weapon server side. So if we look for the update weapon, we pass the player, we pass select, so the player would be whichever player clicked the button. The select would be the integer for 1, and then we're doing an if statement to look up. This is kind of redundant because we're already passing it as an integer, but I'll just leave it there. It's making sure that select is not equal to nil, and then if that is true, the cost of the weapon equals the server side table of the weapon table of, apologize for the pop-ups there, for the same thing. If we pass in 1, it's getting it from the weapon table, weapon price. And then we're checking the player's currency again. So we're getting currency, then we're ending that. And then we have to get the new equipment. So this actually threw me for a loop. So when we spawn in the equipment, we need to know what it is. So we're making it new equipment. And then we're checking, so this new equipment, for example, would be the assault rifle if we were to select number 1. If new equipment and currency, so the currency is greater than or equal to the cost once again, then it's going to remove the cost of the gun from the player's currency or weapon. The new stuff, so this is the new equipment that we're spawning. So we have to do world spawn asset new equipment. So this is actually spawning the gun, but we're storing it in a new variable. And the reason we want to do this as opposed to just spawning it and giving it to the player right out the gate is if they already have a weapon equipped, if we didn't store this as a variable, it would just keep spawning weapons on top of each other. And the player would have multiple weapons until they ran out of equipment slots, which I believe is 8. So we put it in a new variable, checking if it's a player, and then we're doing a for loop. We're getting all the player's equipment, and we're getting all the equipment, we're putting in E, the variable E, and we're checking if the player's current equipment is the same socket as the new stuff socket, so the new equipment socket, and the weapons are all right prop. And so if they already have a weapon, then by doing this check first, it will then destroy whatever weapon they currently have. And then after it does that, then it will equip the player with the new stuff, which is the new weapon. And so this actually took me a while to kind of figure out how to do, because I actually had weapons spawning on top of each other nonstop. So that is the server side of it, and that's pretty much it. The other thing is, if you remember the variable that we had up top, the destroy on death, on player died event, it's fired when the player dies. It does this for loop, it checks if it's a player, and we have this destroy on death set to true. And then if it is true, then we're going to go ahead and destroy that equipment. So if this was false, this wouldn't actually fire, and they would just keep the equipment. And that is pretty much it, I believe. The only other thing I think is on the client side, the currency amounts, we needed to set up an event listener for the resource changed event on player joined. And this allows the menu to be updating as the player's resources change. So we're basically just getting all players. We're doing it the same lookup. I could have just put this here. I don't know why I put it in a different variable. But yeah, we do a for loop. We check if the player is the local player, and then player equals P. This is some redundancy here. And then we're just simply changing the currency, the prop UI text box text to a string as the currency. So I know we went through this pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. I kind of went through this quickly, but hopefully you guys kind of understand there's certain things that only the client side can do. So like the client is the one that can control like the UI stuff, but the server is the only one that can really modify the player, update the resources, remove resources, make, spawn equipment, and force off like the player look and stuff like that. And so to do that, we use these events. And so to actually broadcast the event, to let the server know that we want this event to fire, we use events.broadcast to server, and then we name it whatever we named it in the actual server, and then we pass the player. And you can pass a lot more in each broadcast if you wanted. So if we wanted to pass, the binding they pressed or any other variables we would want to pass, we could go ahead and do that. And on the weapon side or the server side, we just do this events.connect for players, and then we listen for the event and then the function that we want to actually fire when that event is broadcasted. So that's pretty much it for the code. Once again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. What are we at? This video is already 30 minutes long, and so hopefully this video was helpful. I'm going to do follow-up videos on how to adjust other files to change the functionality of this buy menu and kind of set it up so, one, you can only use the buy menu in a specific zone. Also being able to get more currency back, because right now once you spend your currency there's no way to get it back. You only start at 5,000, that's all you have. So it would be nice if we could get a kill and then get some currency from that, or maybe actually win the game, get some currency from that, and different stuff. And even, for example, if we got a headshot, maybe we got some bonus XP and stuff like that. So once again, if you have any questions or comments, leave a comment down below. Hit that like button if you liked the video, and please hit that subscribe button if you want more core related content. I'll catch you next time, Titans.